This is the Dreamers Podcast, episode 34, with real estate investor and serial entrepreneur Stephanie Assi. Today is September 7th, 2021.
And it's just kind of like struck me like, wow, this man has all these properties. And he also didn't have a 9 to 5. And sometimes like there's an issue whenever I would like call him, he's in Hawaii or he's in like LA. Looks like he was living off of his property. And I asked him, I was like, how many do you have? The information that he shared with me really just motivated me to do the same thing. So as soon as I graduated, I saved some money, I did an FHA loan and got that property with 5% down.
Hello world, welcome to the Dreamers Podcast. I am Stephanie Assi, also known as Anne-Lyse Wealth. I am a financial coach and an author. I self-published my first book, Dream of Legacy, a guide to help dreamers reach financial independence and build generational wealth. In this podcast, I'll have conversations with experts and thought leaders who dare to follow their dreams. You'll hear about their journey and their money stories. I hope it inspires you, dreamers out there, to live life on your own terms.
Come on, dreamers, let's change the world!
This podcast is brought to you by Dream of Legacy. Check out dreamoflegacy.com for resources to assist you on your journey to financial independence. Before we get into today's episode, please take a couple minutes to go into Apple Podcasts if you're listening from an Apple device, to rate and review the podcast. If you appreciate the free resources that are provided in this podcast, then the best way to let me know is to do just that. Reviews help the podcast be more visible, and it helps other dreamers discover the podcast. So thank you. I appreciate you. And now let's get back to today's episode. Hello, dreamers. Welcome to the Dreamers Podcast. I'm your host, Anne-Lyse Wealth, and I am so honored that you've decided to tune in today. So I'm chatting with real estate investor, serial entrepreneur, and 9-to-5er, Stephanie Assi. Stephanie is a software engineer and technology contractor in the Washington, D.C. area. Outside of her 9-to-5, Stephanie owns a translation company, a fintech startup operating in her home country of Côte d'Ivoire, a cleaning company, and she's a real estate investor. Earlier this year, she launched the Remote Investing Academy, where she teaches new investors how to get started in real estate and grow a portfolio in long-distance markets. So we're going to talk about Stephanie's entrepreneurial journey, how she learned from her mother's good financial habits, how she went from living paycheck to paycheck to getting good with money. Stephanie talks about the impact that a previous landlord had on her decision to become an investor. And for the most part, she's a long-distance real estate investor. So she shares a few tips with us on how to follow in her footsteps. Things like how to determine which city or state to invest in, what makes a good investment, how to find a good property manager, and the type of real estate agent you should be working with as an investor, and so much more. So here's Stephanie Assi. Stephanie Assi, welcome to the Dreamers Podcast.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Do you mind telling our listeners a little bit about you and what you do?
So I'm Stephanie. I'm a software developer by trade. I have a computer science degree. I have been engineering applications for the past 11, 12 years now for various agencies, both private and public. And I'm also a very, very passionate person regarding personal finance and financial freedom. So during my spare time, I do have other ventures that I am responsible for.
Yeah, you're quite the busy lady. Can you tell us a little bit about your ventures?
The first, I would say, proper business that I started in 2016 was a translation company, which I still have now. And how that started, it was just me looking for a side hustle, really. Being a native French speaker, and I also understand and speak Spanish, not completely fluent, but that's another language that I have under my belt. And I was like, you know what? Let me start a translation company. I hired two translators and we were handling document translations, birth certificates, websites as well, books, any type of official documents that and then we advertised online and got customers. So I did that for 2 to 3 years, and now it's kind of like self-operating. I stepped away a little bit. Now my brother is handling it, so we turned it to a family business. So that was my very first business venture. And then late 2019, early 2020, I started my West African startup. It's called Moja Ride. The idea was being developed all the way since 2018. We wanted to be like the Uber of Africa, affordable transportation and also tech-based transportation, right? With digital payment, with tracking and route optimization. So we've had investors from Toyota and Orange, which is like a well-known telco company throughout Africa. So those are our main investors. And in 2020, I started my cleaning company here in the United States. It's based in the DC area. It's called We Clean DMV. So we provide commercial cleaning and also residential cleaning services. I would say my other biggest business is my real estate business. So I do offer coaching, consulting services, and just helping other aspiring investors who are looking to get started and growing their real estate portfolio.
When did you start investing in real estate?
My very first investment property was in 2013 in Albany, New York. So I bought a 2-unit property for student housing and I held it for 4 years, sold it in 2017. So I ended up selling it and I took the proceeds to buy another property right here in the state of Maryland, which I still hold. And between 2019 and today, I bought 4 more in both St. Louis, Columbus, and also Memphis.
I've been following you on Instagram and you are passionate about building wealth, and it looks like you started sharing your journey with others and teaching them how to do it. I love to learn about my guests' money story and how it kind of contributed to making them who they are today. Can you share an early money memory that impacted your views as an adult?
I got my money habits from my mom. She raised us most of the time. My dad was always on the road. She was very frugal. She had a budget. Now that I'm thinking back, I was like, wow, she was like way ahead back then. So she had like her little spreadsheet with her budget, and she would show us like whenever we wanted new shoes, she would show us like, look at everything that I spent this month. There's no more room to buy you new shoes. You're going to have to wait. She was very transparent and we kind of saw how she managed things. She didn't have like a big job. She was an administrative assistant for like 20 plus years. We were kind of like doing okay. One of the things that stuck with me was like, you know what, when I grow up, yes, I want to do better, but at the same time, like I love how organized she was. So when I started being independent, because I moved to the US when I was 18 and like I started living on my own then. And it really helped me having like a role model in terms of like finances and just being organized at the time. So when I first got here, I did hair braiding while being in school, and you braid somebody's hair, they'll give you like $100 or $200. So I started managing that little by little. I'll have envelopes, like an envelope system. Now that like I'm familiar with like Dave Ramsey and like other people that are big on the personal finance realm, I'm like, wow, they're talking about things that I was doing back then without even thinking about it, right? Like I had my envelopes for my bills, but that's just because all my money was in cash back then. So it wasn't because I was like, oh, super smart or super advanced. Everything was cash. I didn't have a bank account. So I had my little envelopes and labeled them for what they were for. And then from there, I just picked up little habits here and there. Obviously, I had my phases of like overspending, on hair, buying hair, party outfits, things like that. After college, when I started working like an actual 9 to 5, things changed a bit for me because I got a bigger apartment, and being in the bigger apartment, I had more bills. I was like, oh my God, I need to manage my money better because every month I was left with nothing. That's when my desire for extra income came about because I wanted to support my new lifestyle. So I just kind of started looking for ideas on what to do on the side to supplement my income.
What made you get started in real estate?
So my landlord had a lot of properties. So when I was looking to move and I told him about it, I was like, I don't like living here. There's just too much activity going on, police activity, because, I wasn't living in like the best neighborhoods. And he told me he had other properties. Like, oh yeah, I have one downtown, I have one here. And it just kind of like struck me like, wow, this man has all these properties. And he also didn't have a 9 to 5. And sometimes like there's an issue whenever I would like call him, he's in Hawaii or he's in like LA. Looks like he was living off of his property. And I asked him, I was like, how many do you have? The information that he shared with me really just motivated me to do the same thing. So as soon as I graduated, I saved some money, I did an FHA loan and got that property with 5% down.
It looks like you're mostly investing out of state. Can you tell us a little bit about your strategy when it comes to real estate investing?
My strategy is simple. Every now and then I have a lump sum of money and I try to buy where that lump sum can afford me something. Now living in DC and just being in a very high cost of living area, it's very difficult to want to scale or grow your portfolio because all the houses are like 400K and plus. Started doing some research, seeing where I could possibly buy properties for like much less than that. I came across some podcasts. I don't know if you've heard of the Choose FI podcast.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So that was like one of my favorite podcasts that I'd subscribed to between like 2018 and now. And every now and then they have guests, and they had a couple of guests that were involved in real estate. So one of them was like investing in Alabama, and he told his story. I had never thought about all these remote areas, Alabama. I'd never been to Alabama. I've never been to Missouri. So I started kind of doing some research, but listening to somebody else succeeding, I learned from that and then just started doing my research. And I picked Memphis, I picked St. Louis, and I picked Columbus. And the prices are low enough that I bought like more than one.
So outside of, obviously the price point, what makes an area attractive to you?
Oh, yeah. So outside of the low price, so those areas that I've mentioned, they have a high percentage of renters. That drives, the rent prices up. There are cities that are becoming like bigger metropolitan areas. Depending on how much activity there is in terms of like economic growth, jobs, growth happening. So rents are high, but home prices are low. You get pretty good cash flow every month. You can make some repairs if you want to and sell much higher down the line. So I did the math, I calculated like my potential returns, and I was like, let me start with one. And then after I closed on that first house, 3 months later, and I started looking at my cash flow and I was like, wow, this is working pretty well. After that, I started looking for my second one, and then everything was history. Besides the price, you have to look at population trends. You have to look at, okay, are people actually renting a lot there or buying a lot more?
So do you visit your properties before purchasing?
No, I haven't visited any of them. That's because I hired a property manager who is overseeing them for me. And we video call when there are issues. When I was buying, we did like a video tour and, I did a home inspection, which came back with like almost nothing to fix. So those things put me at ease. I buy properties that don't need work. I know I can't be there to like oversee repairs. So I'd rather just buy something that's clean.
So how do you go about finding like a good property manager in those areas?
When you're buying, obviously you're going to hire a real estate agent. My first time I've asked my agent to recommend a property manager, and they have a lot of like contacts because they work directly with property managers with other investors. So he quickly just recommended 3 people. I set up like calls with them, try to like understand their pricing and how they handle emergencies. And then I decided on one. The most important thing that I want to highlight here is to work with an agent who is used to working with investors, because there are some agents that are great realtors, but they don't really handle like investment portfolios or like haven't worked with investors. But the investment based realtors, they know all this. They have all the contractors' information, they have property managers, and because they're already in that space, so they can recommend people to you.
Got it. So can you talk to us maybe a little bit about what real estate has done for you in terms of your wealth building journey?
What it's done is really provide me peace of mind. So every now and then, I travel, and at my job, it's unfortunate to say I don't have a lot of PTO. I get to use like my cash flow from like my properties, helps like fund my trips if I want to travel or invest. So it's funny because like the extra money that I make from my properties, I invest in the stock market. So I have a taxable account where like every month I buy some securities. And then when that money grows, then I use that to buy more properties. So it's like a cycle. It helped a lot because I always have extra money. So just imagine every month having just an extra 2 to 3 thousand laying around that you can do stuff with. There's really no limit. So I just dump all of that in the stock market in my favorite ETFs, and then I just let it grow. And if I need to buy more, I just sell and then use all that money, add on to whatever extra I had saved, and then buy more.
If you've been around for a while, then you know how much I care about financial freedom for all. One thing that often gets in the way of that is debt. That's why I'm happy to announce that I've partnered with an amazing organization called Juno. Juno helps you get lower interest rates by using the power of group negotiation. It is a completely free resource that you can use to secure lower interest rates on new and existing student loans. Head to the link in the episode show notes to find out more. Sunday, Skincare Day, is one of the ways I keep my sanity in these crazy times. DREAMER'S is an all-natural, Black-owned skincare brand carefully handcrafted by parents who could not find the proper care solutions to address their family skin problems. All DREAMER'S products are made of organic and high-quality ingredients, meticulously chosen to give your skin the smooth results and the glow it deserves. For anyone that's listening that's maybe intrigued about real estate, can you talk about maybe 5-step process they can take to get started?
The first step, honestly, would be determining where you want to buy and what you want to buy. So sometimes it's not easy, especially the where part, because there's just like so many states, right? Like, where do I start? Some people are comfortable with risk, other people are not. So for people that are not so comfortable with risk, I would recommend buying where they live. and then live there for a year, move out after a year, and then rent it out. So this is a very low barrier of entry strategy. They call it house hack. Buy where you live, do an FHA loan, and move out after a year, put some tenants there, and then do it again. That will be like my easiest way to do that. And then obviously, as you get started, you want to work with a realtor. The good thing is, as a buyer, you don't pay for their commission. The seller pays for their commission. So there's really nothing to lose to work with a great realtor. A great realtor has a network and they have access to properties that you will not find on Zillow or Redfin. And I actually haven't found any of my properties on those. I would say half of my properties were my agents that came to me saying, oh, I know this investor, he's selling his whole portfolio. Do you want to take a look? And these are the prices, these are the houses. Those houses never made it to Zillow because people always snatch them up before it even gets posted on the open market. In terms of management, if you trust yourself to self-manage, great. If not, hire a property manager. So that's the third step. I just forgot, before we get to the third step, we want to talk about funding, right? So saving enough money for your down payment is important. Having a clean credit report is important because lenders, they're going to be digging around, they'll look at your credit file and determine if it's worth lending to you. And your interest rate is also going to be directly tied to that. So definitely make sure that you clean up your credit so you can have like the best rate possible. And then last but not least, just do your math. Yesterday, I did an Instagram live where we talked about analyzing property. Not all properties are created equal. Some that you see might look like a good deal, but they're not. Some are actually really a good deal. So you want to do your math and analyze the numbers. I have a calculator that I included in one of my courses for that. Yeah, those are like the 5 steps I would give to anyone who's looking to get started.
You are a single mom?
Yes, I am.
An entrepreneur, and you have a full-time job. Some people are concerned that they can't have a business and full-time job, take care of the kids. How do you manage multiple businesses and a full-time job as a single mom?
It's very difficult, honestly. From mother to mother, I'm sure you can understand. But I think it takes a lot of planning. So my days start early and end late. Being organized and removing distractions has been huge for me. So everything for me works on a calendar based. So if it's not on my calendar, it's probably not going to happen. It just takes a lot of organization and discipline. So for me, until something is done, I don't move on to the next thing. When I started in 2016, I was just doing my translation company. And then I added my startup like 2 years later. Then I added my cleaning business 2 years later and, doing real estate now. So things like, you see how it was just gradual. It wasn't starting everything at once and trying to balance. So like I give myself enough time in between so that I'm not too overwhelmed.
That's great advice. Can you talk maybe about your biggest financial mistake?
Biggest financial mistake was investing back home in my country without really doing my due diligence. Again, as a risk taker and an investor and an entrepreneur, we're used to seeing opportunity and then pulling the trigger. I had bought some land in the Ivory Coast back in 2018. And even though it looked too good to be true, I still went ahead and invested in it. Again, I didn't do my due diligence. I was just excited about like the profit opportunity. So I put, $15,000 in that. Like 2 months later, the guy was unreachable. If something is too good to be true, it probably is. That was my biggest lesson. And I've never invested without doing my due diligence since that day. It is what it is now because I went through that. Now I'm a lot more firm when it comes to like where I want my money to go, and I stick to what I know.
And I think, like those financial mistakes that we all make, like sometimes we beat ourselves over the head, but I like to think of them as like, it's almost like the price to pay to just learn and be able to play the game.
That's true. Now it's just something that we talk about and we laugh about, but I saw how it helped me grow and not just jump at the first shiny object.
So, Stephanie, I'd like to end the interview with a round of rapid fire questions. Tell me about a book that changed your perspective on life.
It was, what is that Carnegie? How to Make Friends
And influence people.
Yes, yes. And the funny thing, Anne-Lyse, is I read this book in French when I was in high school, but that book helped me so much again because I was always introverted and my mom bought this book for me when I was in high school. And it kind of helped me just open up.
What's one thing about money you wish you could tell your younger self?
Money comes and goes because my younger self was a hoarder. Even when it comes to money, like I was not generous at all. Like, oh, it's mine. Like I worked hard for it. Like, why should I give my sister $20? She can go figure it out. So help whoever needs help and like don't stress over like, oh, I have this today and I need to like hold on to it forever.
What's the best investment in yourself you've ever made?
Reading and listening to podcasts. For people that like visit me at home, I have a shelf of personal development books that have helped me heal from many different things in adulthood, knowing what I lack and going to like find the help I need has been great.
Fill in the blanks in 3 words or less. Money to me is
plentiful. I always believe that there's always an abundance out there. Maybe not in my own wallet, but out there to be had.
Well, it starts in your mind, right?
Yes.
What do you want your legacy to be?
When it comes to family, most importantly, is leave behind a mindset of hard workers. Oh, I teach, obviously, I only have one child, but I teach him that you have to earn what you desire, right? You work for it and you earn it. But then in terms of money is just really give them a head start. I'm not amassing wealth so I can just like give it all and have them waste it. But I just want to give them a head start for whatever it is that I would like to accomplish.
All right, Stephanie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Can you tell our listeners where they can find you?
The fastest way to contact me would be my Instagram, and my handle is @thegifted_Steph. Now they can also email me. My email is Stephanie@StephanieAssi.com. So my Instagram has all my programs. It has my website listed too with like my different courses.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. This was really, really a pleasurable moment shared with you. I appreciate the time and I appreciate the attention you've given me tonight.
That was Stephanie Assi. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Coming up on the podcast, we're talking taxes with CPA and tax strategist Michelle Varburn. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Dreamers Podcast. You can find the episode show notes and all of the links mentioned at dreamoflegacy.com. If you liked today's episode, here's what you can do to support me and help more dreamers discover the podcast. Follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Rate and review the podcast to help the podcast gain more visibility. Share the podcast with your family, friends, and coworkers. And if you really enjoyed today's episode, please take a second to tag me at thedreamers.podcast on Instagram and let me know what you liked about today's episode. All right, dreamers, that's it for today. I will see you back here next week for another episode of the Dreamers Podcast.
Okay, dreamers, time to build this legacy.
This podcast is for general information purposes only. It is not intended to provide any tax, legal, financial planning, insurance, accounting, investment, or any other kind of professional advice or services. Please consult with an appropriate tax, financial, or legal professional to receive appropriate advice based on your situation.